Okay, I'm not used to using this desk camera, so have to get used to this a little bit. But hello and welcome to you guys. So I am going to go through part two, which I was working on today, and I did link part one in the description box below because I have started um, going through this in video form. It helps me to proofread and it also helps to get comments and feedback as far as what I need to include further clarification on and things like that, or just better explanation. And fortunately, in comments of this discussion, Rockhound did bring something to my mind that I did just very, very briefly throw out there as topics for study. And I thought, yep, I need to include that in here. So that was what I focused on doing, was adding more clarification to this idea of Revelation 6 through 19 being similar to the analogy of the Olympic Games with an opening ceremony, a closing ceremony, and active judgments in between. So the fact of the matter is that this is not the first time that analogy can be used. And so what I did was throw in there, because God works in patterns. He establishes himself one way, then he repeats himself. So maybe that is a new idea for some people, because I know that there are a lot of thoughts out there and opinions about how the seals go. And they're all day one. They're all day one. They are the very embodiment of an opening ceremony. To the games have commenced once the seals are open. Trumpets first half, vial second half, and then Armageddon to close it out. And this is explained by Matthew 24:8 and Revelation 16:17 through the end of the chapter. It very specifically says in two different places that these opening of seals 1 through 6 constitute the beginning, which means they're all opened on in a commencement. There is the opening ceremonies of the 70th week is the opening of the seals. So we'll get there. But the fact that this is new to some people does not escape me. I realize that, like I said, people have various, like a myriad of different ideas about how or opinions about how the seals are open. It's a day one thing. It's an opening ceremonies thing. And like I said, this is not the first time that structure of Olympic Games have been used. We have to remember that the New Testament was written in Greek because that was the language of the time. So in using the Greek way, style, whatever, the games, part of that is the judgments, the crowns, the ceremonies, the awards. That is built into structure of other things. So that's what I was working on today. And I don't know why my camera keeps flashing. Hopefully that's just on my end. I have a feeling it's not. So I write this on my desktop, so it's easier for me to just go live on my desktop, but I can save it to a USB and transfer over to my laptop. It's just easier for me to do this. So hopefully it works out for you guys. I will trust that someone will let me know if it does not. So I'm going to pick up with this idea that I left off in part one. And again, part one is linked below. So if you haven't watch that first, because this is not the beginning. And if you start here, you might be like, huh? So start there and then continue here. But this is my part two to my study of the revelation of Jesus Christ, dealing with the chapter of Revelation 6. So I'm going to pick up where I left off in the last video, and then we'll get through more tonight. As always, if there are questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. But honestly, this is a blessing to me to be able to write this out, because it challenges me to think about everything, because I'm going word by word, line by line, verse by verse, chapter by chapter. And yeah, I can, from a high level overview, talk about this till I'm blue in the face. Like, just let me at it. Like, I love the book of Revelation, but there's an entirely different process to writing it, because I have to make sure that my explanations are on point and sufficient, adequate, and overly explanatory. and make sure that I tie everything together with no loose ends. So it's been a journey, and I love the fact that I've been able to do this though. It's been very awesome for me. So hopefully you guys have gotten something out of it too as you've been following along, if you've been following along. So having said that, like I said, I'll pick up at the end of where I left off in part 1, and we'll start with this next part. So I said it is important to understand the nature of the seals in comparison to the writing within and on the backside of the scroll. We were introduced to this in Revelation 5. There was a scroll with 7 seals with writing within and on the backside, and it was sealed still in Revelation 5. So Revelation 6, we're getting to the unsealing part. So there's a difference in the nature of the seals versus the writing within and on the backside. The seals are removals of restraint. On the other hand, the writing within and on the backside, per Ezekiel 2 and 3, consists of lamentations, mourning, and woe. The writing within, or the trumpets, and the writing on the backside, or the vials, are active judgments. However, as we see the Lamb open each of the seals, we simply see the allowance of specific conditions and situations to commence, for they have reached their appointed time. This was perhaps the most important point of realization that I came to in my studying of the end times, is that the 70th week is an appointed time, which means it is a fixed target, which means it's not going to move. The second coming, the beginning of the 70th week is a fixed target, and the end, the second coming, is a fixed target. And obviously the time in between would thereby be fixed as well. This was the single most important point of fact when I started researching, trying to figure out if the Bible gave us the timing of any of this stuff, was coming to understand it is an appointed time, which makes it a fixed and immovable target. So when you're trying to look at the rapture, because I know that's what's on a lot of people's minds, if and since the 70th week is a fixed target, then the rapture would also be too. It's not a moving target. It cannot just happen at any time. This is what bothers me so much about this, is people think imminent means immediate and or can happen at any time. No, what it means is that there's nothing that needs to happen before that, but it does not mean in any way that it can just happen at any time. If and since everything that follows it is fixed and appointed and not a moving target, that also is not. So this is why I am a fan of learning what these appointed times are, and then you can get on with your life until it's time for that to happen, rather than sitting there and watching incessantly all the time and talking about it incessantly. It's not going to change. It's not going to speed. It's not going to slow. Things will not change. So what I have tried to do is figure out what are the appointed times that the Bible gives us. And then we can just get on with the rest of it, because now we know, or at least we have a good idea. So I make that point, and I will continue to make that point. Appointed times is the seals. We see the Lamb open each of the seals, and we see through that the allowance of specific conditions and situations to commence, for they have reached their appointed time. Time for them to begin. And because it's time for them to begin, that means we got to be gone. And that's when the rapture happens, is the latest point by which God must remove us in order to keep his promise intact that we will not be here for it. And since it has an appointed time, that tells you when we're leaving. It does. The overview of Revelation from chapter 6 through 19, which was written in the language of the time, Greek, is analogous to the Olympic Games. Revelation 6, opening of the seals, opening ceremony, which the last verse in the chapter says, the great day of his wrath is come. So following the opening of seals 1 through 6, the great day of his wrath is come, which means they're all open at the same time, consecutively, obviously, but they're still open back to back sequentially on the first day as an opening ceremony, because after seal 6 is open, it tells us the great day of his wrath is come, has started, which is what Jesus says in Matthew 24:8. All of these are the beginning of sorrows. So Revelation 6 is the opening of the seals, the opening ceremony. Revelation 8 through 16 is the trumpets and vials. Those are the actively judged events. And Revelation 19 is Armageddon, or your closing ceremony. As we conclude Revelation 6, this analogy will become clearer. Like I just said, it plainly tells us that the opening of seals 1 through 6 constitutes the great day of his wrath having come. The way that is written is come as a present tense. However, we should note that the Olympic Games analogies were already presented in prior discussion. And this is why I said this is not the first time that we can use this. It's just once you understand that this exists and then you go backward, it's like, oh yeah, it was there too. How so? Well, in prior discussion of the bema, which is the judgment seat of Christ, and the crowns called Stephanos, sitting atop the heads of the redeemed royal priesthood in Revelation 4. So here's a refresher for those who may have missed it. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, bema, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad." In Revelation 4:4, round about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. The word for judgment seat of Christ is bema. It is an elevated platform upon which a judge sits to render judgment or to give reward. In our case, it would be to give reward. We learn this in 1 Corinthians 3:11 through 15. "For other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if any man build upon this foundation gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, for it shall be revealed by fire. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire." Our standing before the judgment seat of Christ is synonymous with our day of redemption, otherwise known as our day of glorification. That is the reward we shall be given on that day. It is also known as the day the bridegroom comes for his bride and takes her to his father's house. The father's house, which doubles as the wedding chamber in ancient Jewish wedding ceremony eschatology, is the heavenly throne room. John 14:1 through 3, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you," reads, "since I'm going to go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." The elders, who were the ones shown with the crowns, are the redeemed royal priesthood. Thus, their crowns are those of the royal priests. Revelation 5:8 through 10 says, "And when he had taken the book, the 24 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof. For thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God." Redeemed. It means bought out of the marketplace, relocated from earth to heaven. "By thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and hast made us unto our God kings and priests," royal priesthood, "and we shall reign on earth." Since they will reign exactly nothing in heaven, only on earth at a later date, they were shown casting those crowns before the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who sits atop the heavenly throne. Revelation 4:10 and 11, "The 24 elders fall down before him that sat on the throne and worship him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created." This is one of the primary reasons why people say that the multitude that no man can number in Revelation 7 can't be the church, because they don't have crowns. Well, what did the elders do at the end of Revelation 4? They cast them before the throne. Why? Because they ain't reigning anything in heaven, only on earth. Therefore, they do not need them in heaven. The crowns the elders are shown wearing, then casting, are called Stephanos. They are the crown of a victor in ancient athletic games, or in this case, they are the crown of the overcomer. Why the comparison to athletic events? Well, Hebrews 12:1 through 3. "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. The comparison to ancient Greek athletic games via the use of bema and stephanos is made because we will all have just finished running our race. Our day of glorification is each of us crossing the finish line at the same time. Thus, the bema is a singular and corporate event. Perhaps now you can see how the opening and closing ceremony analogy, along with judged events in between, aligns with similar analogies already presented. The difference is that the analogies apply to completely different groups of people. Bema and Stephanos relate to believers caught up and changed to glory at the last trump. The opening ceremony, closing ceremony, and judged events in between relate to unbelievers left on earth after the aforementioned redemptive event. We already know why unbelievers will be subjected to those events, and that was in part 1. They are not sealed by the Spirit, meaning they never believed on the Lord Jesus Christ and were saved. What we may not know yet is how long the period of condemnation / judgment / wrath against them is expected to last. To gain that answer, perhaps a little backstory is in order. When studying the whole of the Bible across both Old and New Testaments, we find multiple eschatological ties to the ancient Jewish wedding ceremony. These ties originated in the Old Testament between God and Adam in Genesis 1-3, and they also apply to Christ and the church, as explained by both Paul in Ephesians 5 and John in his self-titled gospel. After all, Paul told us in 1 Corinthians 15 that Jesus is the second man, i.e. the second Adam, whose name means man. Therefore, we need to infer that what applies to Jesus also applied to Adam and vice versa. The ancient Jewish wedding ceremony is only one dimension of that. However, in this case, it is the most pertinent dimension of that relationship to Revelation 6. As we discussed in our study of both Revelation 3 and 4, the ancient Jewish wedding eschatology follows a specific pattern. In the ancient Jewish wedding ceremony, there was a sequence of steps beginning with the marriage covenant and ending with the marriage supper. This first step would involve the bridegroom going to the home of his intended bride to offer a marriage covenant. In our case, that would be the new covenant. With him, he would have the ketubah. The ketubah would contain the terms of the covenant he was offering her, including the price he was willing to pay for her, also known as the bride price. This was written in the letter to the church of the Laodiceans because, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open unto me, I will come into him and sup with him and he with me, is exactly what this is talking about. The letter to the church of the Laodiceans, they were entirely unsaved. Hence, it is the only of the 7 letters of the 7 churches written to individuals rather than to a collective church, because every single individual in the church of the Laodiceans met the same condition. They were unsaved, and salvation is an individual choice. So that is kind of where that came from. But this is where I wrote this, and I'm copying the text. Hi, Roxanne. Nice to see you. So the ketubah would contain the terms of the covenant he was offering her, including the price he was willing to pay for her. And what is the bride price for the new covenant? Jesus' death on the cross. The bridegroom would knock on the door of her father's house. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open unto me, I will come into him and sup with him and he with me. The father's house, where she resided, and she and her father would invite him in if they wished to discuss these terms. If the terms of the ketubah, along with the bride price, were deemed satisfactory, the parties would drink from the cup and break bread. The symbols, the token of the new covenant, the Last Supper. Eat the bread. Eat. This is my body broken for you. And drink. This is my blood shed for the remission of sins. This is exactly what that was foreshadowing. The cup and the breaking of bread to signal acceptance. The bridegroom and his intended would then move into the betrothal stage of the marriage covenant. During this betrothal stage, several things would occur. First, the bridegroom would leave for a time to go prepare the wedding chamber at his own father's house. John 14, 1-3. This preparation usually meant the bridegroom would be away for 1 to 2 years before returning to marry her. In this case, Jesus will be away for approximately 2,000 years. While he was away, and to ensure she would not forget him or his promises to her, the bridegroom would send gifts to his betrothed. That is what the Spirit is a token, a down payment on our day of glorification. The day of glorification is the day that the bridegroom comes for the bride. It is the marriage. So we have the Spirit indwelling us because it is that Spirit that will change us to glory when we see our bridegroom in the air. But the Spirit is the gifts portion of the new covenant. It's what seals us and sets us specifically for the day of redemption. She would also undergo a readying process referred to as the waiting bride consecrated. Part of this process would include a cleansing bath called a mikvah. That's what do you do while you're waiting? After the period of separation was complete and the wedding chamber was ready, the call would ring out that the bridegroom was coming for his bride. He would snatch her, marry her, and spend 7 days with her in the wedding chamber, consummating the marriage. That is the rapture of the church and our 7 years in heaven. At the end of that 7 days, the bridegroom and his new bride would leave the wedding chamber and celebrate the marriage supper with their wedding guests. And if you guys saw the recent Jubilee day count little chart I put together, that's what that counts down to, is the marriage supper of the Lamb in the kingdom. What we know is that the bride will be spending 7 days in the wedding chamber with her bridegroom. Her removal from earth is the facilitation of the promise Jesus made in Revelation 3:10. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. In this case, the removal of the bride, aka the royal priesthood, will be for a period of 7. Is that literal 24-hour days or something else? In this case, it is something else. How do we know that? Because of the corresponding Old Testament prophecy. So basically what I'm going to do here, and that's where I stopped. Basically what I'm going to do here is bring in the Sabbath cycle, how it related to days of creation. It was written into the law to celebrate the Sabbath, keep it holy. And then it moved into the land Sabbath, the years upon which Daniel's 70th week is predicated. And then it moved into the whole of human history in 2 Peter 3. 1 day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, 1,000 years is as 1 day. So when you're talking about our 7 days in the wedding chamber following the eschatology, is that days according to the Sabbath, or is it years according to the land, or thousands of years relating to the whole of human history? Well, the one that is correct is the weeks of years, which is the period of 7, the Shabuah, which is Daniel 70. So that's the next part, is to give the options of what it could be and then isolate the one that's actually in prophecy, which is Daniel's, relating to the years, the period of 7 years. All right, my nose itches. Hi, Daniel. So that's where I'm at with this. I'm going to continue writing because I don't feel like doing homework. So will there be a gender once we receive our glorious body? If we are Jesus's bride, won't we all be the same, a woman? That's not what that means. Adam was the woman in the marriage covenant with God, and Adam was clearly a man. That's not, gender has no bearing on glorified bodies. As a woman, then no, that's nope. And I honestly am not even going to touch that conversation given the whole gender controversy going on right now. Sorry. I'm not even going to do that. But in the bridegroom conversation, it started with God and Adam in the garden, and then it moved to Jesus in the church. So it's a wedding eschatology, a wedding ceremony, steps in a relationship between two people, and or in our case, people groups. So it's comparative. It's not. It's no. All right, I don't want to go any further down that. I don't want it to turn into something else. So anyway, I will keep writing, and if you guys have any questions or comments, let me know. Like I said, part 1 is linked down below. This is part 2, and so I will discuss the 7 years and the introduction of Daniel's 70th week, because what we will find when we get to seal 1 is that is linked to a covenant via the bow. That language goes back to Genesis 9. So you know the 70th week starts with the introduction of the bow in Revelation 6:2. And you know that the seals 1 through 6 are all day 1 because it lumps them together and says, after the opening of all of them, the great day of his wrath has started, is come. So it starts technically with seal 1, but we know they all happen consecutively on the same day because that day is identified as it having started. So having said that, I will stop talking and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care and have a good night.